So let's let's see. One nice thing to look at might be just to go, okay, simple thing. The scapula moving inwards, right? Maybe I'm not going to mask that. I'll just fake it. So, so this motion through here, there, right? What muscles are going to create that motion? Rhomboids and traps, right? Just those two, doing that. So as I'm doing that, those are things that I want to hit. Now, there's some nuance here worth bearing in mind that's going to be useful if you're doing shapes with this sort of stuff, which is that the traps are attached to the scapula through there, but not through there. So what that means is, like, as this muscle pulls in, it's pulling in from here predominantly. And so here, the scapula will slide underneath the trapezius. It'll slide further underneath the trapezius. It's an important detail. It'll make a difference if you're doing shapes like within that range of motion. Because if your scapulas get pulled forwards, the trapezius gets left behind and the scapula moves away from the trapezius. If they get pulled in, the opposite happens. So through here, like, I need to go, okay, what muscles are causing that action? Rhomboids. Maybe that line of the rhomboids I can see more clearly. Maybe I can't. That'll vary on person to person. Maybe I'll see the trapezius here instead. Like maybe the person's got loose skin and I start to see like creases through here. Or maybe the skin starts to buckle and starts to break through there, or whatever it is, you know, just anything that I can do to sell attention. Certainly through here where we have this tendon, that's going to become more prominent and more noticeable. Now, the thing is, like, if you're working with reference here, what will happen, like, you might have really great reference of someone doing that, but because they're alive and they're human and imperfect, they're not going to be doing just that isolated movement. Other things will be happening. And if you capture all of that, you know, if you're doing correctives or whatever, and you start to just add in other stuff, then you're going to loop in stuff that is not related to the movement that's happening. So kind of important to be thinking about, okay, actually, what are the muscles that are involved in this movement? In a shot sculpt, you'll get away with it all day long, and it might actually add a little bit of extra flavor to it. But I think pretty important to be thinking about just, okay, what is causing this action through there, and then so something like that, right? But this isn't the full story, because this is the muscle that is creating the action. But as soon as we have a muscle doing something, we have a muscle mass that's antagonistic to that, right? So in this case, it's going to be what?
Chest?
Yeah, it's the pecs, right? So as you do that, your pecs are getting stretched out and these muscles are bulging. So if you have one without the other, you're delivering on like half of your story. And so here, well, I'll just do this quickly, fake it. Maybe that just gets pulled back a little bit. But as this gets stretched out, I would say that's probably a good opportunity to find, you know, a little bit more definition. I would say it's kind of counterintuitive, but I think it's a useful rule to go, when muscles get stretched out, then you can find a little bit more definition. And when they get compressed, you may find less, because you've got all the skin and the fat buckling through there. So there, I'm not selling that in a very convincing way, but you know, I'm not going to work that anymore. It's just the idea that as I'm thinking about that, at the same time I'm thinking about that, you know. And any time when I'm working with a pose, thinking about what is the compression, what is the extension through there. So let's take a look at another movement. We'll tell you what, we'll stick with the scapulas, because this can be really confusing as hell. And so we'll try a really difficult one where the scapulas are raised through here. Something like that. Okay, so what muscle? So this is not just a shrug. We're saying we're doing this. What muscle is active in this movement, or what muscles?
Deltoids.
Deltoids, right, for the humerus. So that is deltoids. And for swinging that scapula out?
Trapezius.
Trapezius being a pretty crucial one, right? But specifically, this top portion of the trapezius. Actually, the trapezius is going on top of the scapula and the bottom as well. So it's a muscle mass that is antagonistic to itself, right? As this compresses, the trapezius is getting stretched down there. antagonistic muscle mass of the trapezius would also be the serratus, right? That's grabbing hold of the bottom of the scapula. It's getting pulled up, so we need to be thinking about that story. Pectorals will be getting stretched up, so there's a whole bunch of things for us to think about through here. This motion of the scapula itself can be kind of difficult to figure out, right? Like, when does the scapula start moving? When does the humerus finish moving? When does the scapula start moving? Here's a rule that would probably be quite useful, I would say. So I just want to use his body as a canvas. So let's say in a default pose, so I'm drawing the back through his front. That's his scapula. That's his humerus. Right now, the humerus starts to move upwards. As that moves towards 90 degrees, the scapula starts to move as well. What I would think about is basically like, as you move past 90 degrees, see, this is the spine of the scapula. As you move past 90 degrees, the humerus is parallel to the spine of the scapula. So you find that, whatever the angle is of the arm, that angle carries down into the scapula. So that's going to give you, all we're interested in the scapula is that line and that line. You can figure out that line because you'll either see it or you can find the line of the humerus, and then that allows you to find that line. So I think, that's the movement of the scapula is a thing that throws a lot of people off, and that's a rule that I found it helps get you straight to the point without messing around. Okay, so again, thinking just in terms of story straight off the bat, so just what is compressed, what is extended, what is active in this pose, and I'm not concerned about anything else. So here, trapezius bunching up. I guess if he's not just shrugging, those arms are going to spin outwards. So that's going to give us some other stuff to explore. So here, right, his traps are going to be coming up like this, but like you mentioned, if the humerus is also rotating, then the deltoid is going to be doing that. And so what we'll see here is real compression of the deltoid. And this whole area, remember, so this is the spine of our scapula. This comes around to the front here. This is the acromion process. So this is where it's going to meet the clavicle. So that is all going to stay the same, and it's all bony landmark, meaning that as the humerus bulges around that, doesn't matter how tense he is, that bit stays the depression, and the depression becomes more noticeable as the muscle bulges around it. Something like this. So this is a point where you might really start to see the separation of these different parts of the deltoid, and that it's a good thing, I think, if you do, because it tells you something about the tension of the deltoid. It's also quite likely that you'll start to see skin wrinkling through there. And from a storytelling point of view, it might be really relevant, really important. Okay, so this is giving me most of what I need in terms of the tension, the things that are lifting the scapula up. So then let's go to the opposite. Let's go to the thing that's being the battle that's happening against that. All this area down here that's getting stretched out. You can see this is a deformation that we've seen 1,000 times before, just ugly generic stretching. So so going through this and going, okay, exactly what is everything, and let me work that out. So here, refining the base of the scapula, the fact that the trapezius, like we mentioned, gets left behind. So the scapula is actually going to be getting pulled out away from that. And then here, this is super tense trapezius muscle. So as sharp as I can find that, the better. But then here, it's all just getting stretched out. So I want, if anything, the opposite. And maybe I can find definition, and maybe I can just find clear, straight lines, something to oppose to this kind of wobbliness through there. Okay, and then if we're saying the bottom of our scapula is there, we know that this muscle, the serratus muscle, is always going to follow that line of the scapula. So let's hunt that down through there. So, anytime when you're dealing with poses, origin, insertion points of muscles stay the same. So, if you're not thinking about those, well, maybe it's going to take you off model really quickly. right? That's why the best reference in the world can take you off model super fast, because the guy who's doing that has different proportions to the guy that you're sculpting, or the creature that you're working on. So so that's the thing, a really common thing. Whereas like you just go, well, the muscle's always coming from there, and it's always going to there, so that's that, you know. And so then you use your reference as a guide, but you're not a slave to it. Through here, the rhomboids are going to be getting pulled taut, right? Maybe I want to say something about that. Maybe I don't. And then this area here, okay, this I think is just super confusing in general. So I know I said I wouldn't go over, I'd try and avoid going over too many specifics in this course, but this might be useful to help you figure out when you're working on a raised arm. So what we have through here is teres major diving around to the front. Now, the muscles on the scapula through here, they're coming from the scapula, they're going to the humerus, so they're coming from the scapula, they're going to the humerus, so their concern is pulling the humerus towards the scapula, something like that, or twisting the humerus, like we mentioned before. In this case, the humerus is actively trying to move away from the scapula, so these muscles are getting stretched out. So that's like, okay, then that's my storytelling beat. I go, when a muscle is getting stretched, for me, you might think of it differently, that's fine. For me, I go, okay, I'm looking for straight lines, and I'm looking for more definition. So this might be a time when I go, all right, let's find the teres minor through here. Now, one thing that's just super confusing here is like that you have this would be the triceps. Like the teres major and the teres minor are like chopsticks, right? Grabbing hold of the triceps. So that'll throw you off, but if you spend the time wrapping your head around it, it yields eventually, and then so that's teres major, it's teres minor, then this is going to be infraspinatus, and that's all getting stretched out as well. And like, if you're looking up what are the insertion points of those, you'll see that, you know, teres major diving around to the front. Think about roughly where it would be on the humerus. It's always going to be there, right? And here, latissimus, same sort of thing. So if we're getting, well, my topology is kind of weird through here. Yeah, I'll just ignore that. If we're getting tricky about it, we could see there's another muscle, coracobrachialis, that we'll see through there. But I'm going to ignore that and look at the pecs. So again, like this deformation, we see like day in, day out on the pecs, right? Because it's just, if you have a skin cluster and you're rotating the geometry, this is just that geometry being rotated by that mass. So I'm saying the pecs are getting stretched. So that means that I want to kind of, like, even the nipples are going to be raised through here. Just how do I tell the story of the stretch? One of the things that I have in my internal personality of the deltoid is that it creates an S movement, right? Because this portion is going down further, that portion is coming up higher. Where they meet gives you that S movement, and that S movement becomes exaggerated as the arm gets stretched out. So here, that top part of the pecs, it's originating on that first 2/3 of the clavicle, and then it's going to the humerus, you know, in the exact same place. So I need to think about this as like draw a straight line between those two areas. Really, it's tricky to figure out. It's gonna be something like that, I think. And this was a thing that, like, you can really see Michelangelo doing this, where his anatomy knowledge can be kind of wobbly sometimes, but you can see a thought process, like especially in his sketches. It's like, there's bone there, there's bone there. If it's close together, then it's a bulge. If it's not, it's stretched out. And he's just thinking about muscles as like lines, you know, strung between bones. And I think if you think about that, then it's kind of the same thing. You know, they're always coming from and going to the same place. So those lines are either close together or they're stretched out. You know, so as a basic idea, you know, something like that. And if I want some definition, again, I don't really want to find that definition all the way through. So it's like I can maybe find it at the start, find it at the end, and it gives me something like that, right? Now through here, we found the serratus. And like, so, you know, I've been bad-mouthing the latissimus for a while, going, well, don't worry about that guy. But here I'm saying the latissimus is getting stretched out. And part of my rule is I go, when a muscle gets stretched out, maybe I find the definition. So, do you know what? Maybe I find that a bit more. And then maybe I find some ribs as all of this gets, as the whole surface gets stretched through here. Be cautious about that with shapes, right? Because if you start to sculpt on ribs, then what can happen is, like, obviously as someone's moving, you see these ribs going blunk and then coming in and going back out again. So it's a dangerous thing to play with, but very, very useful for quickly and effectively selling the idea of tension. Okay, that's probably as far as I'd want to take that. Well, I'd want to take it much further, obviously, but I think that as a linear blend, that's not going to make sense. But that's all of the stuff that I'm hunting down through here. Maybe I can be a bit more clear about that. So as the arms get raised, maybe I start to see that the serratus a little bit more, and what my personality rule for the latissimus is that it's kind of sausage shaped. So as that gets pulled tight, maybe I start to see that sausage a bit more. And yeah, that's that. Like, there would in life be knock-on effects through here, right? As soon as I do that, I'm naturally going to readjust my balance and stuff like that. We need to be thinking just what is causing this action and nothing more.